You want to know about the day the galaxy collectively decided to kick humanity out? Well, strap in, because this is one hell of a ride. And trust me, I've seen my fair share of galactic stupidity, but this takes the cake. My name is Crixval, and I've been monitoring human activities for the Galactic Council for the past 15 rotations. Yeah, I know what you're thinking. Why would anyone want that job? Well, someone had to keep an eye on the crazy primates, and apparently, I drew the short straw. The council chambers on Nexus Prime were buzzing that morning. Representatives from 47 different species had gathered, their various appendages clicking, whistling, and vibrating with excitement. The Zephyrians with their blue-tinted skin looked particularly smug, while the insectoid Threx delegation kept their compound eyes fixed on the central podium. Order! Order! Chancellor Vort IX's voice boomed through the translation matrix, his crystalline form pulsing with authority. We are here to address the human problem. Oh, the human problem. Where do I even begin? See, humans have been part of the Galactic Federation for exactly 73 Earth years. Not long by most species standards, but long enough for them to thoroughly piss off everyone else. And, everyone that IT started small, as these things usually do. Trade disputes here, territorial disagreements there. But humans have this remarkable ability to escalate literally everything into a full-blown crisis. It's like they wake up each morning and ask themselves, how can I make the entire galaxy hate me today? Representative Quinn 12 from the Altarian Collective stood first, his tentacles writhing with indignation. The humans have violated 17 trade agreements in the past cycle alone. They refuse to honor our standardized pricing structures. A chorus of agreement rippled through the chamber. I had to stifle a laugh. Standardized pricing structures, right? Like humans were ever going to pay 3 times market value for basic resources just because the Altarians said so. But that wasn't even the good part. Furthermore, Quinn 12 continued, his voice rising to that annoying pitch that made my scales itch. They have been modifying our technology without permission. Now they got everyone's attention. The chamber fell silent except for the low hum of the environmental systems. Captain Rex Hawthorne had been the first to figure it out. Human ingenuity at its finest, or most terrifying, depending on your perspective. The Federation had graciously provided Earth with standard defensive platforms. Basic stuff, really. Shield generators that could maybe stop a small asteroid, point defense systems that could handle pirates if they were feeling particularly generous that day. 3 months later, humans had somehow jury-rigged those same systems into weapons capable of cracking moon-sized asteroids. Not only that, they'd reverse-engineered the shield technology and were now producing it at a fraction of the original cost. Intellectual property theft, shrieked the Zephyrian delegate, her voice box practically smoking with outrage. They have stolen centuries of our research. I wanted to point out that maybe, just maybe, if your centuries of research could be improved upon by a species that had barely figured out faster-than-light travel, you might want to reconsider your approach to innovation. But hey, I was just the observer. What did I know? The real kicker came when Colonel Marcus Steele stood up in the human delegation section. Now, Steele was everything you'd expect from a human military officer. Square jaw, steel gray eyes that had seen too much, and that particular brand of confidence that came from surviving things that should have killed him multiple times over. With respect, Chancellor, Steele said, and I could already tell this was going to be good, we improved upon designs that were frankly inadequate for our needs. The chamber erupted. 46 species, all trying to express their outrage simultaneously in their native languages, created a cacophony that would have made a black hole weep. I'm pretty sure I heard at least 3 different death threats and 1 marriage proposal, though that might have been a translation error. Inadequate. Chancellor Vort IX's form was now pulsing an angry red. Those designs have protected our worlds for millennia. Steele shrugged. Actually shrugged. In front of the entire Galactic Council. Then maybe you've been playing it too safe. And there it was. The fundamental difference between humans and, well, everyone else. We had spent thousands of years perfecting our technology, refining it, making it stable and reliable. Humans had taken one look at our perfected designs and said, yeah, but what if we made it go faster and hit harder? The Threx ambassador, a particularly unpleasant individual named Hive Cluster 7, buzzed forward on his gossamer wings. The humans are dangerous. They weaponize everything. Last week, they turned a mining laser into an orbital bombardment platform. It was an improvement, Steele replied matter-of-factly. Increased efficiency by 40%. You vaporized an asteroid belt. It was in the way. I had to admit, watching an entire galactic government have a collective aneurysm was pretty amusing. But things were about to get a whole lot more interesting. Dr. Lisa Park, Earth's chief science officer, stepped forward. Now, Park was different from Steele, where he was all military precision and barely contained violence. She was pure intellectual curiosity wrapped in a deceptively small package. She had those kind of eyes that suggested she knew things that would make your brain hurt just thinking about them. Honorable delegates, Park began, her voice calm and measured. Perhaps we should discuss why our modifications were necessary in the first place. Oh, this was where it got really good. Your defensive platforms, Park continued, pulling up a holographic display that made half the chamber flinch, operate on the assumption that attackers will follow established combat protocols. They're designed to counter known threats using predictable patterns. The Altarian delegates' tentacles were now twitching with what I recognized as deep-seated fear. That is the nature of civilized warfare. Park smiled. It wasn't a pleasant smile. Civilized warfare is an oxymoron. When someone wants to kill you, they're not going to politely follow your rules. She manipulated the display, showing tactical simulations that made several delegates reach for their emergency inhalers. Your ships maintain formation. Your weapons have standardized firing patterns. Your shields operate on frequencies that haven't changed in 3,000 years. Because they work, screeched the Zephyrian delegate. Against each other, sure. But what happens when someone doesn't play by your rules? The simulation shifted, and I watched as a single human destroyer engaged what should have been an overwhelming Altarian fleet. Instead of the expected slugging match between ships of a line, the human vessel moved like a rabid space shark, hitting and running, using modified weapons that shouldn't have existed to tear apart ships that had been considered invincible. The chamber went dead silent. You're all fighting the last war, Park said quietly. We're preparing for the next one. That's when Chancellor Vort 9 dropped the hammer. The Galactic Council has reached a decision. Humanity's aggressive tendencies and disregard for established protocols make them unsuitable for continued membership in the Federation. Steele raised an eyebrow. You're kicking us out. Effective immediately, all human colonies outside the Sol system must be evacuated. All human vessels must return to Earth space. All trade agreements are hereby terminated. The human delegation exchanged glances. I expected outrage, demands for reconsideration, maybe even threats. Instead, Steele started laughing. Not a polite chuckle or a nervous giggle. A full-blown, belly-deep laugh that echoed through the chamber like the sound of impending doom. Something amusing, Colonel? Chancellor Vort 9 asked, his form now pulsing with confusion rather than anger. Steele wiped his eyes and stood straighter. You think you're punishing us. Are we not? Chancellor, with all due respect, you just did us the biggest favor in human history. That got everyone's attention again, but for different reasons this time. You see, Steele continued, his grin widening, we've been playing nice. Following your rules, respecting your boundaries, trying to fit in with your little galactic community. But the thing about humans is we do our best work when our backs are against the wall. Dr. Park nodded, her own smile matching Steele's intensity. We've been handicapping ourselves to avoid making you uncomfortable. You just removed that handicap. What are you saying? Demanded the Threx ambassador. I'm saying, Steele replied, that you just declared war on the most adaptable, innovative, and downright stubborn species in the galaxy. And you gave us 6 months to prepare. The evacuation timeline. 6 months to get all human assets back to Sol System. That's not a declaration of war, protested Chancellor Vort 9. Steele's expression went cold. Isn't it? You're forcing us out of our colonies, cutting off our trade. isolating us from the rest of the galaxy. In human terms, that's called a blockade. And blockades are acts of war. You wouldn't dare. Dr. Park stepped forward again. Chancellor, you just handed us the perfect excuse to stop holding back. Do you have any idea what human technology looks like when we're not trying to play nice with the neighbors? The answer, as it turned out, was terrifying. Within days of the Council's decision, reports started flooding in from across human space. Colonies that should have been panicking about evacuation were instead buzzing with activity. Mining operations that had been running at minimum efficiency to avoid disrupting local ecosystems suddenly shifted into overdrive. Manufacturing plants that had been producing consumer goods retooled overnight for military production that I watched it all from my monitoring station, filing reports that nobody wanted to read. The humans weren't just leaving quietly. They were preparing for something big. The first hint of what was coming arrived 3 weeks later, when Captain Sarah Voss of the merchant vessel Lucky Strike requested docking permission at Kepler Station. Nothing unusual there. Humans still had a few weeks left on their Federation membership. What was unusual was what happened when the station's automated systems tried to scan her cargo. Unable to penetrate hull shielding, reported Station Commander Flux Prime, his mechanical voice carrying just a hint of confusion, requesting manual inspection. Captain Voss's voice crackled through the comm system, and I could hear the smirk in her words. Sorry, Commander. New Earth regulations. All cargo compartments are sealed during transport to prevent contamination. This is highly irregular. So is kicking an entire species out of the galaxy. The Lucky Strike docked, conducted its business, and left. Nothing seemed wrong until 3 hours later when half of Kepler Station's defensive grid mysteriously went offline for maintenance. Maintenance that nobody had scheduled. IT took them 6 hours to figure out that the humans had somehow installed remote access backdoors in their systems during what should have been a routine cargo exchange. 6 hours during which every other human ship in the sector had quietly slipped past the station's compromised sensors. That's when the galaxy realized that maybe, just maybe, they'd made a mistake. But by then, it was already too late. The humans had 6 months to prepare, and they weren't wasting a single day of it. The Galactic voted to exile Earth, Part 2 3 months into the evacuation period. I started receiving reports that made my scales crawl. And trust me, after 15 rotations of monitoring humans, that's saying something. Captain Jake Morrison had been running smuggling operations out of the Vega system for the better part of a decade. Nothing major, just enough to keep the local authorities annoyed and his crew fed. But Jake was about to become something much more dangerous than a simple smuggler. He was about to become a symbol. The Zephyrian patrol cruiser Righteous Fury had been making regular sweeps through the outer colonies, ensuring human compliance with the evacuation orders. Commander Zictal prided himself on running a tight ship, and he'd been particularly zealous about enforcing the new restrictions. That zealousness was about to bite him in his blue-tinted rear end. Unknown vessel, this is Zephyrian Patrol Command. Zictal's voice crackled through the comm system. You're in violation of evacuation protocols. Prepare to be boarded. Jake's response came through crystal clear, and I could practically hear the grin in his voice. Sorry, Commander. I'm just a simple merchant trying to make an honest living. Honest living my exhaust port. Fichtal snapped. You're 3 systems outside the permitted evacuation route. Funny thing about that, Jake replied, and I could hear machinery humming in the background. Turns out we found a shortcut. What happened next redefined the term shortcut for the entire galaxy. The lucky break. Jake's modified cargo hauler shouldn't have been able to outrun a Zephyrian patrol cruiser. Hell, it shouldn't have been able to outrun a particularly motivated asteroid. But when the Righteous Fury opened fire, expecting an easy kill, Jake's ship did something that violated several known laws of physics. IT folded space. Not the careful, calculated space folding that required massive gates and precise calculations. This was raw, brutal, and completely insane. Jake's ship basically grabbed reality by the throat and twisted it into a pretzel. The Righteous Fury's weapons passed harmlessly through empty space while the Lucky Break materialized 3,000 kilometers away, weapons hot and ready. New rule, Commander. Jake's voice came through the comm. calm as a summer breeze. You shoot at us, we shoot back. Fair warning. The Righteous Fury's shields barely had time to register the incoming fire before Jake's modified plasma cannons turned the patrol cruiser into an expanding cloud of superheated gas. Word spread through the galaxy faster than a plague. Humans weren't just leaving quietly. They were fighting back, and they were winning. Lieutenant Commander Arya Cross had been stationed at the Titan mining facility when the evacuation orders came down. Unlike most of her colleagues, Arya didn't see the Exile as a disaster. She saw it as an opportunity. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced to her crew over the facility's intercom, "we have 6 months to strip mine this system and get out. I suggest we make it count." The Titan facility had been operating under Federation environmental guidelines for decades. Careful extraction, minimal impact, sustainable practices. All very civilized and completely inadequate for what Arya had in mind. Within hours, the facility transformed from a mining operation into something that would have made the old strip miners of Earth weep with joy. Automated harvesters that had been programmed for gentle collection suddenly began tearing through asteroid fields like mechanical piranhas. The local Altarian Oversight Committee was beside themselves. "This level of extraction is completely unauthorized," protested Inspector Vex-14, his tentacles writhing with bureaucratic outrage. That area's response was to activate every mining platform in the system simultaneously. "Inspector, in about 5 months, this won't be your problem anymore. Right now, it's not your problem either. The environmental impact alone will be someone else's headache. We're leaving, remember?" The beautiful thing about the human exodus was how quickly they adapted to their new reality. Dr. Emma Rodriguez, chief researcher at the Kepler Science Station, had been working on theoretical physics projects that were decades away from practical application. The Exile suddenly made those theoretical projects very, very practical. "The problem with faster-than-light travel," she explained to her team, "is that everyone assumes you need massive infrastructure to make it work. Gates, beacons, carefully mapped routes." Her assistant, Dr. Kevin Zhang, looked up from his calculations. "But that's just because nobody's been desperate enough to try alternatives." Exactly. Desperation breeds innovation. What they created in the next 6 weeks would have taken the Federation centuries to develop, if they'd ever developed it at all. Portable space-folding technology that could be installed on any ship larger than a shuttle. Not the elegant, efficient systems that the galaxy was used to, but brutal, effective ones that got the job done. First test run nearly tore a hole in reality itself. The second test run worked perfectly. By the time the galaxy realized what the humans were doing, they had already deployed the technology across their entire fleet. Ships that should have taken months to reach Earth were making the trip in days. Entire colonies were being evacuated, not in panic, but in organized, methodical waves that left the local authorities completely confused. But the real surprise came when the evacuation deadline arrived. Chancellor Vort-9 had expected to see a broken, defeated species limping back to their home system with their tails between their legs. Instead, he got a priority transmission from Colonel Steele that made his crystalline form flicker with confusion. "Chancellor, this is Colonel Marcus Steele of the newly established Earth Defense Force. I'm calling to inform you that the evacuation has been completed ahead of schedule." Ahead of schedule? Vort-9's voice carried a note of suspicion. "All human assets have been removed from Federation space." "Every last one," Steele confirmed. "We've also taken the liberty of upgrading our defensive capabilities. Wouldn't want to be caught unprepared, you understand." The transmission ended, leaving the Chancellor staring at empty space. 3 days later, the first reports started coming in. The Proxima Centauri system, which had been considered strategically unimportant by the Federation, suddenly sported a defensive grid that made the most fortified worlds look like children's toys. Weapon platforms that could engage targets at interstellar distances. Shield generators that could protect entire star systems. The Alpha Centauri system had been transformed into a massive shipyard, churning out vessels that made Federation dreadnoughts look like patrol boats. And Earth itself. I remember watching the long-range scans from my monitoring station, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. The planet that had once been a blue-green marble was now surrounded by a shell of orbital platforms. each one bristling with weapons that shouldn't have existed. The Luna colony had been expanded into a fortress that could house the entire Earth fleet. Mars had been converted into a massive manufacturing complex. The asteroid belt had been turned into a defensive minefield that would make any invasion attempt a suicide mission. But that wasn't the scary part. The scary part was what they'd done to the outer planets that Jupiter's moons had been hollowed out and converted into mobile battle stations. Saturn's rings had been seeded with automated defense drones. Uranus and Neptune had been surrounded by stealth platforms that could appear anywhere in the system within minutes. In 6 months, humanity had turned their home system into the most heavily fortified region of space in galactic history. The first Federation ship to test those defenses was the exploration vessel Peaceful Inquiry, commanded by Captain Relvos of the Threx Confederation. It was supposed to be a routine survey mission, checking to make sure the humans were complying with their exile. IT lasted exactly 47 seconds. The moment the Peaceful Inquiry crossed in a Sol system, it was surrounded by more firepower than most sector fleets could muster. Weapons locked on from every direction, including several that seemed to be coming from empty space. Unknown vessel, you are entering restricted airspace, came the calm voice of Admiral Jessica Kane, the newly appointed Defender of Earth. State your business or withdraw immediately. Captain Relvos, to his credit, tried to maintain diplomatic protocols. This is Captain Relvos of the Federation vessel Peaceful Inquiry. We are conducting a routine survey to ensure compliance with exile restrictions. Captain, you have 30 seconds to reverse course before we demonstrate exactly how compliant we've been. Relvos looked at his tactical display and nearly molted on the spot. His ship was being painted by weapons systems that his computers couldn't even identify. Energy signatures that didn't match any known technology. Targeting solutions that suggested the humans could destroy his ship in at least 17 different ways. Message received, he managed to croak. Withdrawing immediately. The Peaceful Inquiry set a new record for the fastest retreat in Federation history. Word of the incident spread through the galaxy like wildfire. The humans hadn't just left quietly. They'd built a fortress and dared anyone to try and breach it. But the real message came a week later, when every major government in the galaxy received the same transmission simultaneously. Colonel Steele appeared on screens across known space, his expression calm and professional. Behind him, through the command center windows, you could see the orbital platforms surrounding Earth, each one a testament to human ingenuity and determination. Ladies, gentlemen, and various other forms of sentient life, Steele began, his voice carrying the weight of absolute certainty. This is Colonel Marcus Steele of the Earth Defense Force. I'm calling to inform you that humanity has officially withdrawn from the Galactic Federation as requested. He paused, and I swear I could see the hint of a smile at the corners of his mouth. However, we want to make our position clear. We didn't ask to be exiled. We didn't want to leave. But since you've made your choice, we've made ours. The transmission shifted to show tactical displays that made military analysts across the galaxy reach for their emergency medications. Ship designs that incorporated technology decades ahead of anything the Federation possessed. Weapons systems that could crack moons. Defensive grids that could repel entire fleets. We're no longer bound by Federation treaties, regulations, or rules of engagement. We are no longer required to limit our technology to approved specifications. We are no longer obligated to play nice with our neighbors. The displays shifted again, showing the human fleet in all its terrifying glory. Vessels that moved like living things, weapons that bent the laws of physics, and shields that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. We want to be left alone. We want to develop our civilization in peace. But if anyone decides that our exile makes us vulnerable, if anyone thinks that isolation makes us weak, they're welcome to test that theory. Steele's expression hardened, and for a moment, I saw something that made my blood run cold. This wasn't just a human soldier. This was a predator who had been caged for too long and was finally free to hunt. We've spent the last 6 months preparing for war. We've built weapons that would give you nightmares. We've developed tactics that would make your military theorists weep. We've created a defense grid that turns our entire system into a fortress. The transmission ended with a simple message that appeared on every screen in the galaxy. Humanity has left the building. Please don't make us come back. 6 months later, I filed my final report on human activities. The galaxy had gotten exactly what it asked for. The humans were gone, exiled to their home system, no longer causing problems for the rest of us. But as I sealed the report and prepared to move on to my next assignment, I couldn't shake the feeling that we'd made a terrible mistake. We'd wanted to get rid of a problem, but instead, we created something far worse, that we'd created an enemy. And the thing about humans is they're really, really good at being enemies. The galaxy was about to learn that lesson the hard way. Because isolation doesn't make humans weaker, IT makes them angrier. And an angry human is the most dangerous thing in the universe.